Hi, folks. Hey, great to see you all. My name's Norma Cohen. I'm an actor, writer, and I also work helping people to project their work in public. Writers, poets, literary salons, the lot. And first of all, I'd just like you to welcome you all to this amazing event. This is in this auspicious, brilliant new building of Foyles, welcoming in Novel London to the first ever literary festival that Novel London has presented. I've been involved with Zafyra, or I'll talk about in a minute, for the last 3 or 4 years, helping her with Novel London projects. And I have to say that I think it's a great organisation, dedicated, with no funding whatsoever, and hopefully in the future it will attract funding, helping writers, aspiring novelists to air their work, get support, get feedback, and ultimately publish. And so I've witnessed crowded events at bookshops across London, on barges, up towers, all kinds of weird and interesting venues. And so this is the culmination. It's the first huge, big event on a big scale, and I hope it's the first of a lot. And I think I have to take my hat off to Serena, who's a fountain of new ideas. She really is an original thinker, and she's made it her mission to establish Novel London, lots of other charitable projects supporting writers, and I think we should give her a clap, really, because people don't often get support. Anyway, having said that, if I can negotiate putting my specs on, no mean feat, as well as negotiating a mic, it's my pleasure and privilege to have worked with a lot of the writers today, very speedily, just sort of doing that somehow, giving people the joie de vivre and confidence to amplify the brilliant work they've already created. And now we're going to be listening to 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 6 writers, a selection of the competition entrants before the results are all given out. So it's my pleasure, firstly, to introduce Melissa Addey, who is going to give a flavour of her work. Can you give her a clap, please?
Hi. So my name is Melissa Addey. I mostly write historical fiction, and I have literally just finished today, so just today this work got published, a series set in 18th century China in the Forbidden City. It's a series of 4 books, and each novel follows one of the concubines or empresses who lived in the Forbidden City during the Qing dynasty. So each one follows the path that woman took, and each one has some elements of fiction, but is mostly based on a real person. This one is called The Cold Palace. That's its cover. It follows the story of a woman called Ulanara. She was brought in as a concubine to a prince, and eventually ended up becoming empress. So over time, she worked her way up to the rank of empress. At that point, she went mad, cut off all her hair, which was a terrible thing to do in terms of etiquette, because it implied that either the emperor or his mother had died. And since neither of them had, it was interpreted as cursing them, and therefore it was absolutely unforgivable behavior. And the emperor sent her to the Cold Palace. The Cold Palace is an expression, it means you're exiled from court. So this is Ulanara's story, and what I've chosen to do is take a little extract from the beginning when Ulanara gets chosen for the Forbidden Cities, for marriage into the Forbidden City. And the way they are chosen is that every girl, every 3 years, every girl between the age of 13 and 16 had to go to the Forbidden City to be selected if wished by the imperial family. So basically the imperial family got first choice of every woman in the empire every 3 years. So nobody ever could get married until you'd been checked out by the imperial family first. And this gives you a flavour of how you get selected. The two things you need to know from this section is that Ulanara really doesn't want to be chosen. She's already in love with someone. Her family is very happy for him to marry him if she's not selected. And that there's a girl called Wan who's standing right next to her who does want to be selected. And I think that's pretty much all you need to know. So this is the first chapter, and it's called Falling Blossoms. The woman shakes her head. Malodorous, she snaps. The rejected girl's face flushes crimson in shame as she is led away back to her family. Apparently the smell from her armpits would have been offensive to an imperial nose. Beijing at the end of the 6th month is unbearably hot. I'm surprised all of the girls here have not been rejected for this reason. The sturdy woman approaches and gestures impatiently for me to raise my arm. I, like all the other girls here, have already had to shed my fine outer robes, made of the best silk my family could afford. I asked my mother to send me in something plainer, still afraid of being chosen, but she refused. I won't be shamed, she said huffily. I know you don't want to be chosen, Ulanara, but you will be examined by the palace officials. They will see your father's name and our banner on the paperwork beside your own name. I won't have them look down their noses at us just because you wouldn't wear the best we can provide. And so I arrived this morning at an administrative hall in Beijing, just outside the Forbidden City itself. It seems we are not to be allowed into its hallowed precincts until we have been selected as the most superior candidates. I am dressed in a beautiful robe, the best I have ever owned. It is a delicate blue like a spring sky, covered with intricate embroidery featuring fluttering magpies and trees heavy with golden peaches, all symbols for love and happiness, for longevity, prosperity, and future sons, highly auspicious and appropriate for today. It was removed in moments. Eunuchs gathered round each girl in turn to disrobe us and leave us in nothing but our underrobes. The room we are in is large and stifling, full of girls disrobing and re-robing as they are inspected by stout older women, elaborately dressed to show off their status as senior ladies in waiting, perhaps wives to important court officials. Eunuchs bustle about, some assisting with the undressing and dressing, some noting down comments made by the ladies on each girl and reminding them of every candidate's status and family. Perhaps a smelly girl will be reassessed if her family is very important. Perhaps a lowly girl from an out-of-favour family will be marked down as malodorous as a good way of removing her from the possibility of being chosen. I lift my arm as instructed, and the sturdy woman assigned to my row puts her face against my armpit and inhales loudly. I look away in embarrassment, and when I look back, she's nodding briskly to the eunuch at her side, who makes a note against my name. It seems I do not stink. I look hopefully about for my robe to be given back to me, but instead the woman kneels in front of me and lifts up my underskirts. I step backwards. "Keep still, you stupid girl," she says. I stop moving and gaze down at her in horror as she sticks her face under the skirts, close to my private parts, and I hear her inhale again. She emerges and nods to the eunuch, ignoring my now scarlet face. Apparently every part of me must be found to be acceptable to the sensitivities of a possible imperial husband. By the time I have regained my composure and my robe, my hair is being checked for lice and my teeth scrutinised. The court physician takes my 12 pulses and examines my tongue before he pronounces me to be of a cold and damp disposition, something the imperial kitchens will take into account when cooking for me, should I end up residing here. "Bound feet? You have bound feet?" Heads turn. A girl has been found with bound feet, despite being Manchu. She looks terrified. We all crane our heads to see under her skirts, catch a glimpse of tiny pointed stubs encased in embroidered slippers, and then quickly look away again. The head eunuch is appalled. "Bound feet are forbidden, as you and your family are well aware. What were they thinking? A noble Manchu family copying the disgusting habits of the common Han Chinese. Your family will be fined, and you and all your sisters will be rejected for any possible union with the imperial family." So a little bit of time goes by, and now this woman arrives who's going to choose the girls. "Noble consort New Huru, primary consort to His Imperial Majesty," shouts the eunuch, and we all straighten up. The woman who enters the courtyard, surrounded by guards and attendants, must be about 40. She is very tall for a woman. She stands almost as tall as a few of her guards. She makes her way to a carved throne, which has been placed at one end of the courtyard in front of our neatly laid out rows, then sits. Her attendants fuss about her for a few moments before she irritably waves them away. Her face is set in a grimly determined expression, and I wonder whether she dislikes the task of choosing exquisite young brides for her husband, the emperor, whether she is being eaten up with jealousy at this very moment. By her side stands the chief eunuch, a very splendidly dressed and imposing figure who arrived with her, currently consulting various folded papers so that he can give Lady Nuhuru advice on whom to select. These papers will give details of our families and fathers, as well as any additional useful information, perhaps recent military prowess to be rewarded, or noble connections to be taken account of. There is some discreet murmuring in Lady Nuhuru's ear before she nods and indicates 3 girls in rapid succession, each of whom falls to their knees and kowtows to her before the chief eunuch calls out their names and pronounces them concubines for the emperor himself. There follows a few moments of murmured discussions, Lady Nuhuru shaking her head. There will be no further selection of ladies for the emperor, announces the chief eunuch, looking a little disappointed, as do some of the girls, who perhaps had their eyes on the emperor. A handful of girls are chosen as ladies in waiting. These look quite pleased. They will serve at court for a few years, catch the eye of a suitably high-placed husband if they can, and be given a goodly sum of money with which to start married life. Her ladyship will now choose the primary consort and additional ladies for her son, Prince Bauer of the first rank. Lady Nuhuru seems reluctant to begin the process of choosing her son's brides. She pauses, and the chief eunuch leans to whisper in her ear. She looks up in my direction, and for a horrible moment I think she is looking at me, before I realise that in fact she is looking at Fucha, standing in the row behind me. Lady Nuhuru nods. Lady Fucha, chosen as Prince Bauer's primary consort. I hear the rustle of silk from behind me as the newly made Lady Fucha kowtows to her future mother-in-law. Wan gives a small nod. Her prediction was correct. There is another consultation, another pause, another nod. Lady Gao, chosen as Gur, concubine to Prince Bao. Lady Su, chosen as Gur, concubine to Prince Bao. She's not very high-ranking, murmurs Wan, who seems well-informed. I watch the girl as she's led to one side. She is exquisitely beautiful. Whatever her family status, she has more than made up for it with her face and figure. Lady Zemin, chosen as Gur, concubine to Prince Bao. She's related to Lady Fucha, whispers Wan. I nod. It looks as though her family is being much favoured this year, being granted both a primary consort and a regular concubine. A couple of other girls are chosen, but they're standing right at the back and we cannot turn to see them. Lady Nuhuru looks at our row and I hold my breath, but her eyes rest on Wan instead. I can feel her whole body tense up next to me. Lady Wan, chosen as Gur, concubine to Prince Bao. I want and turn to hug her, but I cannot, so instead I stand very still and watch her as she's led away. Last tiny bit?
Half a minute.
Okay. Lady Ulanara, chosen as Gur, concubine to Prince Bao. For a moment, I think another girl here must have the same name as me. I wait for her to move, to hear the rustle of her robes as she kneels, and then I see the expectant expression of the chief eunuch and realise both he and Lady Nuhuru are looking directly at me. Her great weight inside me drags me down. I feel my knees weakening and then the cold, hard thud of cobblestones as I hit the floor without my will or knowledge.
Love to introduce Christopher Bowden, is that how you pronounce it? Who I worked with many years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, and since then he's got another novel out, and the covers are absolutely stunning and obviously attracted lots of interest because there's lots of great creds on the frontispieces. So Christopher Bowden, give him a big clap, folks.
In my excitement, I've just spilt water all down my front. Purely attention-seeking. Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
I will read a bit from my latest book, which is called The Amber Maze. It's the sixth of six what I call literary mysteries. Each one has a colour in the title, and the content of the book is related to the colour in one way or another. But they're all freestanding, so you're all very welcome to buy the latest one without having read any of the others. Perversely, I propose to start at page 40. Everybody else seems to start at the beginning, but I'm afraid I haven't. According to the blurb, and I should know because I wrote it, it says, while staying in a Dorset cottage, Hugh Mullion, the main character, finds a mysterious key down the side of an antique chair. No one can say how long the key has been there or what it opens. Hugh's search for answers will unlock the secrets of the troubled life of a talented artist, destined to be hailed a neglected genius 50 years after his death. And no secret is darker than that of the Amber Maze, from whose malign influence he never escaped. The trail takes Hugh from Edwardian Oxfordshire to 1960s Camden Town, where the ghosts of the past are finally laid to rest. Right. The trail has so far taken Hugh to a country house in Oxfordshire called Ascendine Court. He goes there because he discovers that the character who emerges from the box which the key opens had an association unclear at this place. He's wandering around the house and gardens. The house manager, the one who's called Simon, whose name will appear, is called away, so Hugh is left to his own devices. Unwisely, he decides to go to explore the maze. So here we are. The sun was dipping, but the day... The sun was slipping, but the day was still pleasantly warm as he pushed past the barrier and approached the entrance of the maze. It was flanked by limestone columns topped by balls bearing the masks of tragedy and comedy, an allusion, perhaps, to Clive Paragon's career on the stage, now largely forgotten. As he took his first faltering steps into the maze, he was struck by the height of the hedges, 8 feet at least, soaring above him, and by how thick they were, how solid and confining, how narrow the path between them. He turned the first corner and felt for the plan of the maze he'd brought to Ascendine, the one on which Rosie and Eleanor, his daughters, had marked the route to the centre and how to get out again. Damn, it was in his jacket with the phone. Never mind, how long should he allow to do the maze? 20 minutes? Half an hour? That should be plenty. And hadn't he read somewhere that by following the outside walls of a maze consistently to the left, he would arrive back at the entrance? Or was it the right? Or was that a different sort of maze entirely? He found himself walking faster, but the sense of progress was illusory as he came to a dead end, turned back and wondered which way he had come and which way he should go. He could have done with a ball of thread. He stumbled further into the maze and further from the entrance and the outside world. He was becoming increasingly disoriented, his decisions increasingly arbitrary when faced with choices. Had he been along here before? It all looked the same. The walls seemed even taller, the sharp, straight sides tighter and more impenetrable. And the silence was absolute. The bird song had tailed away. He could hear nothing. And no one, he realized, could hear him. Had Simon found his note? Would someone come looking? It was cold. The light was fading, the walls becoming darker. He found it hard to see as he blundered forward, the panic rising. And the anger, too. The situation was absurd. He could only be yards from the way he'd come in. How long had he been here? He couldn't even read his watch. The silence was broken by an insistent rustling from under a hedge, and then a slithering, but whether coming closer or moving away, he couldn't tell. A sudden scream, a fox, an owl. He started to run, his mouth and throat dry. He grasped that he had left the squares of the outer section of the maze and was following in fits and starts circles that were getting smaller. At length, he fell into an open area. It was lighter here than in the body of the maze. He made out ghostly white against the darkness of the hedge opposite a long stone bench. He dropped to it, and arms folded, breathing heavily, he leaned forward and stared at the pitted paving in front of him. He was exhausted. After a few minutes, he eased himself up and over to the statue on the plinth in the centre, encrusted with lichen, a representation of Pan, horned and hooved, leering malevolently as he gripped his pipe. Beneath, carved in relief on the front of the plinth, the maze in miniature, as if to taunt those who had struggled to reach their goal or to celebrate their success. But Hugh's only thought was how to escape from the maze and get back to the house. Nothing would induce him to return by those dizzying paths through the blackness of the interior, nor could he stay here. And then he remembered that the maze had a separate exit. The dark circle surrounding him appeared unbroken. He couldn't even see how he'd entered it. He followed the hedge round until he spotted a pale sign, framed by yew, that must have been left after public closure of the maze. It was in the shape of a pointing hand, way out. He burst from the exit as if propelled by an unseen force. He came to a halt on an area of grass and steadied himself on the edge of a marble urn. It was smooth and unexpectedly warm to the touch. How long had he been in that place? 1 hour? 2? He tilted the face of his watch to catch the sunset stretched beneath the trees in the distance. Barely 3/4 of an hour. That's it.
These books are all lined up in triplicate or quadruplet over there, ready for the buying of. Right, it's my pleasure now to introduce David Griffin. I haven't had a chance to work with you, but I'm sure it's going to be great. So can we give him a big David's just going to do a brief intro to his work and then give us a lovely 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Great to see you all. Yes, my name is David John Griffin. I've written 5 books, which consists of 4 novels and a novella with short stories. The 5th book is this one, Turquoise Traveller, that I've just published, or has just been published. It's a strange urban fantasy, and I'll read you the blurb on the back. I'll give you an idea. Stave Swirler is lost in someone else's nightmarish dream. His given mission is to save his realm before it's too late. A fantastical journey of strange discovery in conflict with the malevolent agents of Tremolon Xandar. Stave must summon the powers of his mind to overcome their evil influences. A seductive, surreal and imaginative tale of fantasy and love that will captivate you from beginning to end. So, the traveller is Stave Swirler. He's travelling through reality overlaid with dream elements. And he has to discover why and what that's all about. And he's being chased by Tremolon Xandar and his evil agents. The passage I'm going to read, he's found himself on an underground station platform that's sealed. He can't get out. The rails are filled with water, and there's strange noises coming from the tunnel. But first he's having an argument with the passengers. Now, reverberating from the darkened tunnel, adding to the sound of slopping and hissing of sprayed liquid, came the noise of squealing and clanging, that of metal scraping over metal, and metal hitting upon metal with a beat and a pulse and a pace. Whoever's dreaming this unknown terror deserves to be punished, someone shouted, and his words echoed down the underground train platform. "What is it?" cried out a young woman. "I'm getting really worried now." An air of oppressiveness and clamminess descended, no different than that felt with the onset of a storm. "There isn't any need to panic, everyone. Keep calm. It might be a motorboat from the underground resources team with a crew. Some kind of rescue," Stave answered to reassure them all. "It could even be," he paused, "all right, I don't know what else it could be." Dario Lar called out over the heads of the others. "Well, that's just dandy, isn't it? He doesn't know what it is." Stave was becoming annoyed. "Fine, you tell us what it is if you think you're so clever." "I never said I was clever. You said you were clever in your clever green suit." "I don't recall saying anything of the sort, and my suit is turquoise." "Turquoise, lurquoise, whatever. I'm insulted how you are interpreting my dream with the unknown. I was promised a gathering. I promised myself I'd get there, and I must find my bicycle." Feeling real in the unreal yet again, or unreal in the real, he thought. Whichever it is, swinging from one extreme to the other, a giddy pendulum of emotions. "Whether it be my dream or yours, it's still real enough," Stave replied, "so we've all got to pull ourselves together. It could be help on the way for us. I'll go and see." "So you can get to the gathering before me?" Typical. I never said that, said Stave. I've no idea how to get to this gathering everyone keeps on talking about, if that satisfies you. I'll tell you what will satisfy me. Stop squabbling like babies in a pram, shouted one of the waiting group. Now there were sounds of the hissing of pistons from inside the tunnel, joined with the reverberated noises of splashing and grinding. Whatever it is getting louder and sending waves down the stream. And the stream's getting lower, do you see? I think we ought to stand at the other end to be on the safe side. You can do that if you want, but I'm going up to that tunnel entrance to see what's coming out, Stave said, and he marched with determination one way, while the majority of the other passengers walked past him towards the other end to collect there. They stood close to each other within a mauve shadow, looking like a single dark block of stone. The trainee agent, the former bus driver, with the double rows of teeth, sat on the platform with his feet above the water. He pushed himself forward and once in, waded away from the noise. As he entered the tunnel at the far end, his shadow disintegrated into grey and blue snake-like shapes and were taken away by the rippling flow of the stream over the tracks. Stave stared intently at the left-hand tunnel mouth to see the beginning of a magnificent metal horse emerge, at least 12 feet high from head to hoof and 14 feet long. Spurts of steam came from its nostrils. Its large head was formed from strips of deep brown iron. The mane was melded strands of alloy on a thick neck. The huge plated body appeared, made with hexagons of bronze and copper, globules of mercury seeping from under the plates of the giant's shoulders. There were spots of verdigris and rust in streaks over the mighty body panels. The artificial creature lifted its heavy hooves, shod with gunmetal, as if a show horse above the lowering level of water. Each time a hoof descended, a shower of liquid shot from the surface, and as the incredible animal machine walked out further, it exposed exotic filigree chiselled onto its copper flanks and a moulded tail made from fused spun wire. At the base of its thick metal neck was an iron ring. Through the ring was a wide and stout pole. Attached to either end were long shafts connected to a gypsy caravan behind. Stave watched in awe as the mighty horse pulled the high caravan fully into view. The carved wheels of it were massive and they turned like watermill wheels. Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you.
That was a lovely, quiet, laconic, aware reading, didn't you think? I mean, I just could envisage the whole experience, but I liked your throwaway wit. So thank you so much. Right, the next person who I have had the pleasure working with is Tara. Yeah. Great. And she's going to briefly introduce her own piece and then give her own performance, which is brilliant. So thank you so much. Pleasure.
Can I first say thank you to Serena and Novel London for this great opportunity, and personally to my friend Tori for driving with me all the way from the West Country here today, and for my friend Lisa coming all the way from Hackney. Yeah. So I had the good fortune to work for the first all-female radio station, and from that experience came the germinal seed for this novel. My female character is sort of having a midlife crisis at the age of 30, if that's possible. And her father, who's a frustrated scientist, would have her believe in all kinds of newfangled possibilities made possible by his readings of the scientific journal, etc., etc. She, however, has to figure out whether she is going to listen to her father and believe in his viewpoints of the world, or whether she's going to forge her own brave understanding of the world. Without further ado, Radio Honey, Chapter 1, to the sound of Ordinary World by Duran. There's no point working in a radio station unless you love music, real music. And yeah, sure, you'll have to play the station shit, but every now and then you'll be able to sneak one in that you genuinely like. Something that makes you feel good to be alive, pure musical gold. A little Billie Holiday or Marvin Gaye, an old delight hit, or maybe even my old fave, the Shaft theme tune. I've been cautioned for less. Then there's what you can do with the playlist. You can move the tunes around to suit your own show-specific running order, depending on the way you're feeling that day, to accommodate an interview which ran long, insert a breaking news item, or just because you had to hightail it to the little girl's room and back, in which case an extra long song is called for. It could be a start it light and build up kind of day, or a hit them with a big tune in the intro and keep building till you hit the end of your coffee rush affair. Then again, it could be the kind of day where you're trying to forget a certain someone, in which case you'll play every love 'em and leave 'em song in the I've Been Dumped catalogue, of which there are many, and today is one of those days. His name is Jack, or Bastard. Although it could be Steve, John, Bob, or Adam, there have been so many that never got past the first shag, followed by my cringing attempts to keep what modicum of original interest they had in me alive, only to see them retreat further at a giddy pace. Is the word desperate now so clearly emblazoned on my forehead that no male in their right mind would engage me for more than an evening's friendly without a matrimonial lawyer and a good prenup? And when you bump into these passing lovers months or years down the line, they are invariably with Jessica, Annabelle, Lisa, or Sarah, and she is so much more beautiful than your own reflection looking back at you in the mirror, 30s, 5'6", dyed blonde hair, great tits, great ass. Suddenly you understand why Steve, John, Bob, Adam et al. Dumped you. Or she is so plain Jane, you wonder how Steve, John, Bob, or Adam dumped you and plumped for her. In your mind, you imagine sexual acts she must perform with one hand tied behind her back, gymnastic-like maneuvers that make her indispensable. In reality, it's probably something a lot simpler, something like good old-fashioned chemistry. I mean, they say there's someone out there for everyone, but is that statistically and evolutionarily possible? I can hear my father spouting his statistical nonentities as I ponder this. He is very fond of a social statistic, the latest scientific data, or a cringingly data-driven chart analysis. But isn't it just as reasonable to assume that there is no logic, no rhyme or reason, and we all simply clamor about just trying to get the best we can? Like a game of musical chairs where the music stops and you, having missed all the other chairs, simply jump for the last available place to rest your rump. Perhaps now, when you see Steve, John, Bob, or Adam with this other woman, you can rationalize that it wasn't that you weren't pretty enough or cool enough, but that he simply decided to sit down at a pause in the music. That somehow the music had been playing so loudly when you two were together with the swelling of violins and heartstrings that there wasn't a moment to sit down and take stock. Propelled along by the beauty of the dance, you both twirled yourselves out of the ring. Nah. Face it, you weren't the one for any of them. And you wonder if you will be the one for anyone, and if not, whether that will be okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Brilliant. Was that brilliant or was that brilliant? Model. It's a great reading. Thank you so much. Let's just give her another clap, I think, because I missed it on Serena B. Robbins is next, and we've also had a great chance to work together. And Serena just told me that she actually works at Theatre Royal Stratford East, lucky her, on lots of great theatre projects. So, give her a big clap. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Zafyra is a superhero with a difference. She can time travel. Not only that, but she can manipulate time and use her neuro-linguistic powers to reprogram people's ingrained beliefs. She has a unique telekinetic bond with her mother, who together help save the world from a Western power-hungry dictator and build bridges with the Middle East. There's only one problem. Her nemesis has the same superpowers and battles her across time, manipulating history until one of them is defeated and their true identity is revealed. It began with a slight ripple across my coffee cup. 30 seconds later, it happened again, but this time my coffee sploshed over the side of the cup, soaking the lilac lace tablecloth. I held my breath as I tried to fathom what was going on. I looked over to the television, and there was the normal lunchtime chat show with 4 middle-aged women sitting behind a long, curved melamine desk. Then the screen suddenly turned blue. No signal. It was at this point that I began to get anxious. Was it another earth tremor like a few months earlier? It had woken me up in the middle of the night with the bed swaying. As I fumbled to put on the lamp, I remembered the fear of thinking that the flat was haunted by a poltergeist. It wasn't until the morning that the news on the radio announced that there'd been an earthquake. It had measured 7.5 on the moment magnitude scale, and it had wrecked parts of East London, especially a substantial amount of the 2012 Olympic site. The estimated damage and cost of repair would run into billions. I gingerly moved towards the window and pulled the curtain back. A faint breeze was leaking through the closed double-glazed window, and I could hear a rushing sound. It was like radio interference. As I parted the net curtain and looked out, I could see a wall, and it dawned on me, and I froze. It was a wall of water, racing towards me and building in height. The noise was thunderous now, and the power and speed that was coming towards me made the window shake violently and then implode. Glass shards flew into my face and hair and up my nostrils, and I screamed from the shock of pain that splintered along the lower leg bone. As my body slammed into the wall on the opposite side of the room, I felt a sharp, searing pain shoot across my abdomen, down to my pelvis and my groin. I screamed out, "No!" as all I could think about was my unborn baby. The water then comes smashing in through the wall. I gasped as the pounding, freezing flood began to make my home disintegrate around me. I felt my arms and legs desperately trying to kick, but the pain was immense, and I didn't want to die. Not like this. I began to choke as the water invaded my mouth and nostrils. "Breathe, must breathe," I kept telling myself. A flash of light cut through my vision and made a momentary rainbow in the swirling water. I remember thinking that it must have been lightning, and then I blacked out. The throbbing pain woke me. Everywhere hurts. tried to breathe through it all, but all I can manage are jagged gasps. I hear a chair scrape against the floor. I'm afraid to open my eyes and see where I am, but I know I have no choice. I might be in more danger. I try to lift my eyelids, but they feel tight and heavy and swollen. I manage to open my left eye a crack, and I just see tiny dots of light whizzing in front of me. With effort, I pull my right eyelid, and I see the dots of light hovering and scurrying around me, but just around me, not beyond me. Beyond me is darkness, a deep, dense darkness. I choke as I take a rapid intake of breath. It's caught in my chest. Then I remember my baby. I try to touch my stomach to see if it's been hurt, but I can't move my hands. They're somehow restrained by an invisible force. I think, what is this? Where the hell am I? I call, hello? My voice is hoarse and strained. I call again, hello? Help! There is movement in my periphery vision. To the right, as I turn my head, I see a woman come through the door and approach me where I am laying. I can't understand what I'm seeing. Have I damaged my mind? This woman looks at me and smiles. I can't understand. She looks like an older me, at least 20 years older. She has long grey hair tied back in a plait and lines on her face that deepens when she smiles. My name is Zafyra, she says. I am your daughter. Thank you.
Wasn't that brilliant? Brilliant reading, really impassioned and terrifying. So, thank you very much. Tension gathering, tension capturing. Well, we come to the final reader, novelist, who I've got the pleasure of introducing, Serena Kovandzich. Is that how I pronounce it properly? Kovandzich. She was just relaying to me a bit about the background to her novel, which is riveting and gripping, and I'd love to know how it works right through. So perhaps you'd like to take over, Sarah. And I'm really keen and curious to know how this one pans out.
No pressure. Dobry večer. Good evening. My name's Sarah Kovandzich, and I'm going to be reading an extract from the first chapter of my book, Marshal, Tito Street. I work professionally as an editor, mainly writing about education and health, but I've had this on a back burner for a while. It's a fictionalised memoir dedicated to my father, Vasa, who arrived in England from Yugoslavia in 1946 as a political refugee. A few years ago, I discovered that 65 years after his death, my father was still classed as an enemy of the state, by a state that no longer even exists. To rehabilitate him, I needed to gather evidence to clear his name, which led me to carry out extensive research in England, Austria, Serbia, and Croatia, exploring the archives of universities, concentration camps, the Church of England, and the YMCA of Belgrade, where my grandfather, Brasha, had been Yugoslavia's national secretary in the run-up to World War II. I started writing the story, and then I found this. It's a notebook of my father's with some of his own writings, and he was never able to finish it. Among them is a prologue he wrote in 1956. In it, he refers to the youth and music of the time when he wrote, the Teddy Boys and rock and roll. He writes, "Today, you have the opportunity to choose your own way of life, fought for you as sacrifices of the youth that lived in the days of war. I hope that in writing this book, you will come to find some of the same courage that I had to find." This is my first ever reading of Marshal, Tito Street, but having had to stand in a court in Belgrade to make a statement in Serbian. I'm hoping this will be easier. Thank you. The exit doors open to release us into airport arrivals. I notice a man in a slightly dishevelled suit. He's waving at us. His untamed greying hair is accompanied by a greying moustache, and he's smoking a pipe, which he'll continue to do anywhere and everywhere for the next 35 years. The man knows no English, but when he smiles, his eyes beam at us. My Uncle Dika formally introduces us to my Auntie Mila's cousin Velibor. In this culture, he's as close to my aunt as a brother. We squeeze into the back of Velibor's Yugo. He drives us into Belgrade city centre, then circles a block of grey buildings until he spots a car pulling off the pavement and nips into the space before anyone else has the chance. We unfold our bodies to follow Velibor and Uncle Dika into the building in front of us. Auntie Mila is waiting. We haven't seen her since she came to England for my father's funeral, but she doesn't seem to change. She's wearing her best dress, never flamboyant. The clothes are muted, like the building, and slightly shapeless to hide the extra weight she carries these days. But later, I'll understand it's about more than that. She is still in the habit of trying not to draw attention to herself, still unable to believe, after all these years, that the secret police aren't watching her, ready to ask her where her clothes came from. As she stands in the doorway, she holds a handkerchief to her face, overcome with emotion at our first ever arrival in the country, only wishing my father, her brother Vasa, could be with us too. Her English is broken, but soon starts to warm up. We take off our shoes, and she ushers us into a large, comfortable lounge that doubles up as a bedroom. Sit, sit, she urges. Noticing my lack of socks, she hurries out of the room, coming back seconds later with a pair of her slippers. I'd been enjoying the cool of the parquet floor beneath my bare feet, but I will never be able to persuade her of that. She disappears again, returning with a tray of water glasses and a jar of what looks like lumpy jam. Try, she says, handing me a teaspoon. Sensing that I am unsure what to do, Velibor goes first, scooping one whole fruit from the jar, savouring it in his mouth before washing it down with water. Mila has cooked the peaches herself to make the traditional preserve that visitors are ceremoniously served, and everyone who has tasted it says it's the best slatko in town. We hear a shout from the window. Mila leans across the balcony, returning with a plate of freshly boiled corn on the cob. Her neighbour wants to welcome us too. No sooner have we finished than Mila shoos us into the kitchen, where she's been busy cooking up a feast of gibanitsa, a layered cheese pie, paprika, stuffed peppers, and all kinds of torte, cakes. We soon understand that most of the week will be spent eating. Velibor faithfully delivers us to every living relative in the driving distance. All are eager to meet us, embrace us, offer us a glass of slivovitsa, gesture at how my brother and I take after our father when we smile, and on account of our large noses, although they don't mention that. Then they welcome us with a feast of their own making until my skinny teenage body is so stuffed I think I'll explode. Somehow, in between eating, while Uncle Tito works and Auntie Mila cooks, we manage to see all sides of the city. Our cousin takes us to a rock concert in the park. Velibor's car rattles all the way up Mount Avila to visit the monument to the unknown hero, where a Serbian soldier from World War I is buried. And we admire the spectacular views over the city from the TV tower. I have my first sip of the local Yellen beer in Skodalia, the Covent Garden-style streets where tourists are serenaded by local musicians playing accordions and guitars. And everywhere we go, there's a framed photograph on the wall of the same man, Josip Broz Tito, communist president of Yugoslavia. It would be unthinkable for a museum, cafe, or restaurant not to display his picture. The last day of our trip arrives, and Auntie Mila fusses around us, trying to hide her tears as she pushes more homemade food into our impossibly full suitcases. She hugs me tight, pressing a slim silver box into my hand, a tiny powder compact with Coty engraved on the lid. She's treasured it since 1946. Vassa sent me from Paris, she says, between her tears. I open the clasp. The mirror on the inside of the lid is still intact, but the powder is long gone, my aunt having loved every grain she dusted over her face as a young woman. The puff has been replaced with cotton wool. Underneath, on a delicate chain, is a gold crucifix. Take, please, it belonged to your grandmother. I politely thank her, despite wondering what I'll do with this old-fashioned jewellery. I'm too young to consider branding myself an atheist. But religion just hasn't played a part in my life. Maybe Dad lost faith after everything that happened. But while we wait in the departure lounge for our flight back to England, I clutch the silver compact, thinking for the first time about the grandmother I never knew. I feel my husband's arm around me, bringing me back to the present. It's Monday the 1st of June, 2015. By coincidence, this would have been my father's birthday. We're sitting on a bench in the corridor of the court, outside room number 32. Suddenly, a voice comes over the tannoy. It's calling my name.
I love the crisp, direct quality of that, of the prose. And for all kinds of reasons, I look forward to seeing it in print properly. It was great, wasn't it? So, shall we all? Nice to have support. We all need support from our friends and family, don't we? So let's all give a clap to those 6 lovely... My pleasure and privilege to introduce finally Dan Holloway, who's patently the most brilliantly creative editor, as he's been displaying today, and he's also been judging the prize-giving ceremony. So I'd love you to put your hands together for Dan Holloway.
Woo! I've got 2. 2 microphones is probably too much even for me, isn't it? Yeah, that's weird. I'll give that one back to you. In case anyone wants to do long acceptance speeches, not having another mic available is probably a good thing to avoid that. So I had written comments about all the shortlisted entries, but then I thought if I read out the comments of the people who didn't win prizes, that sort of gives away too much information. So what I thought I'd do instead is I will get in touch with everyone who hasn't won one of the 3 prizes afterwards by email, if they are happy for Serena to send me their email with my comments, why I thought they were all wonderful. It was a really, really weird experience judging this because I just had these sort of anonymous pieces of prose. It's then really, really strange when you get to meet the people behind them and sort of feel that you're being judged as well on how you've judged them, and that's quite frightening. So one of the things that I loved was that everything was so different. There were literally no 2 books, as I think I said earlier, would even have sat in the same room here, let alone on the same shelf. So that was wonderful, but also made it slightly a weird experience trying to compare them. I'm not going to make the apples and oranges cliches, blah, 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 blah. So I will just get on. I was going to even read a poem, but I'm not going to. That would just get in the way of things. Sorry? Read a poem. Okay, I'll read a poem. That way people can wait even longer to find out who's won. That's really cruel, especially as we were running about 3 minutes ahead of time on that. And as a slam poet, that's exactly the length of a slam poem. Okay, so this is a poem about it's about storytelling, and it's dedicated to all my wonderful people I've worked with over the years who are no longer with us. So this is for Daisy, you don't remember Daisy, do you? Davy, you do remember, the wonderful Davy, and most recently Leanne. Legendary people in the poetry scene and the novel writing scene. This is called We Were Making Fairy Tales. We were making fairy tales. We were knights of rhyme so high our mics made bite marks in the belly of the sky. We married hope and disappointment and anointed pages with them. We took notes of rage and fear and motes of tenderness and made their dreams our stage with them. We took shame and at pen point made them summon every poet to make wages for our souls with them. We were making fairy tales. We were Bonnie and Clyde. We were Jekyll and Hyde. We were the moon and tide. We were a skin that only had one side. Damn it, we were Park and Ride. We were making fairy tales while they were getting by. All the people at their 9 to 5, the morning swarm performing caffeinated rituals in their concrete hives. Burnt out minds still leaking empty lines, echoes of the decades where their lives were left behind, their white lightning veins ablaze through days of mediocrity and nights of getting high and mornings coming down and never getting dry. But we were making fairy tales. We trailed gingerbread rhymes and threads of twine through the labyrinthine minefields in our minds. We folded syllables into origami cranes and poems into paper planes and flew into the stars like speeding guitars repeating the fastest riffs the Pistols ever played, and scratched our names inside the eyelids of its flames. And your anger was so pure, and your stanzas were so raw, and the heavens were so sure that every drop of agony was true. The mermaids sang in stereo for you. We were making fairy tales, but now I'm looking in at shadows that are slowly growing thin through windows that are slowly filling in, and there's silence instead of once upon a time, and there's silence stealing lines from rhymes and times from memories and melodies from all our tunes, and there's silence healing all our sacred wounds, and there's Thank you. Thank you for letting me read, Safina. So I'm not going to read comments out about anything other than the top 3 entries because I don't want to give information away. But I will be in touch with everyone who was shortlisted because I do want to tell you all about how wonderful your stories were, because they really, really were. And the three prize-winning stories are very different in their own ways. Okay, so I'll do the blurb first. You'll be able to work out who it is if it's you. What I loved about this, there was an incredible sense of place. The way I instantly clicked with the characters. I loved the sense of mystery and the pacing being absolutely spot on. It was one of the very rare first chapters I have ever read where I can't imagine any agent not being desperate to read chapter 2, and that's a remarkable thing to say that you don't say very often, and that's Death of a Dream Peddler. I don't have anything to give you because your prize is something that you need to speak to Safina afterwards, but who's taking photos? Cool. So we're going to recreate this later with photos. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, in second place. So one of the real delights of judging this competition has been the variety of entries, not just in terms of genre, but as an editor in terms of the narrative techniques employed. And this is a story that very successfully negotiates a time shift in the opening chapter, which needs a lot of elements to be aligned in order to be successful. The author achieves this effortlessly, and as a result, by the time we reach the present-day narrator, we not only have a large amount of contextual information, but wonderful character insights. So that's Marshal, Tito Street, Sarah Cavendish. Okay, so the winner, and this is like a horoscope, I think I've managed to write this in a way that no one will guess what book it's about. But it's still absolutely true. This is the piece that does so many things right, it should be used as a how-to guide, is my opening sentence. The voice is unfaltering, the pacing comma perfect, and the way it instantly slots us into exactly the right place in the story is outstanding. But most of all, this is a textbook example of how to introduce characters. There are lots of characters for an opening chapter, which is one of the biggest alarm bells for me as an editor, because it's one of the easiest ways there is of stopping readers becoming fully immersed in a story. But here it is handled with such skill that I wasn't pulled away from the layers of foundation that were being built in any way. So in first place is Melissa Addey, The Cold Palace. Thank you. You can say something if you...
I might cry if I say something. That is so cool. I said to someone, I don't really enter for awards because I don't win, because I write genre. And that's so cool. Thank you.
Do you want everyone to come up on stage now? All the prize winners first, Zafyra? Cool. Do you want a moment?
I just do that when I get excited.
Brilliant. There you go.
Yours?
Hello.
Hello. Hey.